You want to know what the heartbeat of a mid-sized airline looks like. It doesn't look like those smiling stewardesses with the terrifyingly perfect teeth on the billboards. It doesn't look like the shiny, polished fuselage of a Boeing 737 sitting on the tarmac like a golden calf waiting for worship. No, the heartbeat of this industry looks like a windowless bunker in Queens that smells like burnt popcorn, anxiety, and the distinct, metallic tang of a breakdown waiting to happen. It looks like me, Nicole, staring at a wall of monitors at 4 a.m., nursing a cup of coffee that tastes like it was brewed in an ashtray, praying that the de-icing trucks in Minneapolis actually show up before the FAA decides to crawl up my ass with a flashlight. For 11 years, I've been the operations lead. That's a fancy title for professional turd polisher. My job is simple. I take the logistical nightmare of flying metal tubes full of entitled tourists and business bros across the country, and I make sure they don't crash into each other or get stuck in a holding pattern over O'Hare until they run out of fuel and hope. I am the invisible hand. I am the reason your luggage actually makes it to Denver, even if your soul died somewhere over Nebraska. The system we use, it's called AeroLink. It sounds futuristic, right? Like something Elon Musk would tweet about while high. In reality, AeroLink is a patchwork monstrosity of code written in the late 90s by a guy named Dave who probably died of a stroke at his keyboard. It's held together by digital duct tape, prayers, and a series of legacy overrides that I, and only I, know how to navigate. It's a temperamental beast. You treat it right, you feed it the right data codes, and it hums. You look at it sideways or God forbid. You try to optimize it without asking permission, and it will ground a fleet faster than a pilot failing a breathalyzer. This particular Tuesday started like every other Tuesday for the last decade. I walked into the OCC, the hum of the servers vibrating in my fillings. The floor is covered in that industrial carpet that was probably gray once but is now a shade of despair beige. I sat down at my station, the command throne, which is actually just a Herman Miller chair with a broken lumbar support that I stole from HR 3 years ago. Morning, sunshine, grunted heavyset Mike, my shift supervisor. Mike looks like a thumb with a mustache. He was eating a breakfast burrito that smelled like a biological weapon. "Don't start with me, Mike," I said, logging in. The screen flickered green. My reflection in the monitor looked back at me, bags under my eyes big enough to check without a fee. Hair pulled back in a bun so tight it was practically a facelift. "How's the eastern seaboard?" "Fucked," Mike mumbled, spraying crumbs. "Storm front in the Carolinas. Boston is already delaying ground crews, and we've got a warning light on the routing server." "It's the Tuesday update lag," I said, cracking my knuckles. "I'll bypass the handshake protocol. Just keep the crews on standby." I typed, fast. My fingers know the keyboard better than they know the touch of another human being. That's sad, isn't it? That's the life. You trade intimacy for uptime. You trade your youth for a pension that probably won't exist when you get there. Within 10 minutes, I had rerouted 3 flights out of Charlotte, bribed a gate agent in Newark with a promise of overtime, and manually patched the server lag before the automated system could trigger a fleet-wide panic. The warning light blinked off. Green. Beautiful, soothing green. See, people think planes fly on jet fuel. They don't. They fly on the sheer, unadulterated stubbornness of people like me who refuse to let the universe win. The universe wants chaos. It wants weather delays and mechanical failures and pilots sleeping with flight attendants and screwing up the roster. I am the wall against the chaos. By the way, before I tell you how this whole house of cards came crashing down thanks to a pair of Gucci-wearing morons, do me a solid. Hit that subscribe button and give this a like. It's the only dopamine hit I get these days besides watching my enemies fail. It helps the algorithm or whatever, and frankly, I need the validation because my therapist quit. Okay, back to the grime. I was feeling good. I was feeling like a god of logistics. I had my lukewarm sludge coffee, I had my green screens, and I had the illusion of control. But you know what they say about the illusion of control. It's usually shattered by someone with a teeth-whitening addiction and an MBA they bought online. At 9 a.m., the door to the OCC swung open. Usually, nobody comes in here unless something is burning or someone is fired. The air pressure in the room actually changed. The smell of burnt popcorn was instantly replaced by an aggressive cloud of Santal 33 and entitlement. I spun my chair around, standing there, looking like they just wandered off the set of a reality show about people who have never cleaned a toilet, were Blake and Courtney. Blake is the owner's son. He's 32, has the jawline of a superhero and the business acumen of a ham sandwich. He spent the last 5 years on a spiritual sabbatical in Bali, which I assume is code for doing coke off a surfboard. Now, he was back, wearing a suit that cost more than my annual rent, the title that meant nothing, Chief Strategy Officer, and clinging to his arm like a barnacle with a blowout was Courtney. Courtney was a lot. She was a former lifestyle influencer turned operations enthusiast. She had eyes that were dead inside but surrounded by perfect lashes, and she was holding a tablet like it was the 10 Commandments. "Nicole," Blake boomed, flashing a smile that was all veneers and no warmth. "Just the lady we wanted to see." my stomach dropped. It was the same feeling you get when you hear a weird grinding noise in your car's transmission miles from civilization. Blake, I said, not standing up. To what do I owe the pleasure? The coffee machine is broken if that's what you're looking for. Oh no, we're not here for coffee, Courtney chimed in. Her voice was high, airy, like she was talking to a toddler or a golden retriever. We're here to observe. Blake's dad thinks it's time we really understood the core of the business, you know. Streamline things? Streamline? I hate that word. Streamline is corporate speak for fire the people who know what they're doing and replace them with an app that doesn't work. Streamline, I repeated flatly. Well, right now I'm streamlining a 747 around a thunderstorm in Atlanta so 300 people don't die. So observe away. Just don't touch anything. Blake laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Always a firecracker, Nicole. That's what Dad loves about you, the grit. But we're thinking, maybe we can modernize that grit, make it scalable. He walked over to my bank of monitors, reaching out a manicured hand toward the screen displaying the raw code of the Aero Link roster. Don't, I snapped. He froze. Relax, Nicole, it's just data. It's not data, Blake, it's a live artery. You touch that screen, you might accidentally cancel a fuel order in Detroit. You want to explain to a plane full of angry passengers why they're stuck on the tarmac smelling the lavatory for 4 hours? He pulled his hand back, but his eyes narrowed. For a second, the mask slipped. The chill Bali bro vanished, and I saw the petulant prince who's never been told no in his life. We have a meeting at noon, Blake said, his voice dropping an octave. Boardroom, be there. We need to discuss the future. I'm busy keeping the present alive, Blake. It wasn't a request, Nicole. They turned and left, trailing their cloud of expensive perfume. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was heavy. Mike looked at me over his burrito. That felt ominous. Yeah, I said, turning back to my screens. The green code blurred for a second. That felt like the beginning of the end, Mike. Better check your LinkedIn. I didn't know it then, but I was right. The storm in the Carolinas was nothing compared to the shitstorm that had just walked out the door. I walked into the boardroom at noon sharp. The room was mostly glass, overlooking the hangar. It was a cruel architectural joke. The suits could look down at the mechanics busting their knuckles and sweating grease while sipping their sparkling water. It was like a zoo exhibit for the working class. The founder, Old Man Henderson, wasn't there. That was the first red flag. Henderson was a dinosaur, a man who built this airline with a single Piper Cub and a lot of questionable loans in the 70s. He shouted, he drank scotch at 10 a.m., but he respected the hustle. If Henderson was absent, it meant the asylum was officially being run by the inmates. Blake sat at the head of the table. Courtney was to his right, typing furiously on her tablet, probably updating her girl boss Pinterest board. The rest of the table was filled with the terrified faces of middle management, people who had mortgages and kids with braces and were currently calculating how long their severance would last. Okay, team, let's pivot, Blake announced as I sat down. He didn't even look up. We've been analyzing the metrics with Courtney's new insights. Courtney's insights. I almost choked on my own spit. Courtney's last job was marketing a detox tea that made people shit their pants in public. Now she was analyzing aviation logistics. So Courtney started, standing up and dimming the lights. A PowerPoint projected onto the wall. The first slide just said vibe shift in neon pink font. I wish I was joking. I really do. We feel that the airline is too reactive, Courtney said, gesturing vaguely. Ops is always putting out fires. We want to be proactive. We want to use AI to predict the fires before they happen. That's called weather forecasting, I said from the back. We already do that. It's on Channel 4. A few nervous titters from the accounting guys. Blake glared at me. Funny, Nicole, but we're talking about structural productivity. For example, she clicked to the next slide. It showed a map of our hub in Chicago. Why do we have so many redundant routes to Milwaukee? It seems wasteful. The algorithm says we can cut 40% of those flights and just use larger planes on a consolidated schedule. I leaned forward. The rage was starting to bubble up in my chest, hot and acidic like heartburn. Courtney, I said, keeping my voice dangerously low. We fly the CRJ-200s to Milwaukee because the runway at the secondary airport can't handle the weight of the larger 737s. If you consolidate to big planes, you have to fly into the main hub, which has a landing fee that is 3 times higher. You will lose $2 million a month in fees alone. Also, the CRJs are for business commuters. They need frequency, not capacity. You cut the frequency, they switch to Delta. Silence, the kind of silence where you can hear the air conditioning wheezing. Courtney blinked. She looked at Blake. Blake looked at the table. Well, Blake said, clearing his throat, that's just legacy thinking. You can negotiate the fees. I know a guy. You know a guy who controls the Chicago Port Authority? I asked. Is his name God? Because that's who sets the rates. Enough, Blake snapped. The point is the ops department is bloated. We have too many people monitoring systems that should be automated. We're paying for expertise we don't need. He looked directly at me then. We're going to implement a new dashboard. Salesforce integration. It's going to visualize the data so anyone can run ops. We won't need specialists hoarding information. I saw what this was. This wasn't about efficiency. This was about ego. They looked at me, a 45-year-old woman in a polyester company polo, smelling like stale coffee, and they saw a relic. They saw a glitch in their sleek, modern matrix. They hated that I knew where the bodies were buried. They hated that they needed me. So they decided they didn't. For the next 2 weeks, the vibe shift began. It was a massacre. They fired Jerry, the maintenance scheduler. Jerry had a limp and a bad attitude, but he could juggle parts inventory in his head. They replaced him with a scheduling bot that immediately ordered 400 airplane toilets and 0 brake pads. They cut the night shift at the help desk. Nobody flies at 3 a.m., Blake argued. Except for the cargo haulers that make up 30% of our revenue. You absolute walnut, I watched it all happen. I tried to fight. I sent emails. I printed reports. I highlighted the catastrophic risks in bright yellow marker. Response from Blake, thanks for the feedback, Nicole. Let's stay positive and trust the process. The smiley face, that passive-aggressive, soulless colon parenthesis, it was the digital equivalent of spitting in my face. Courtney started shadowing me. That meant she sat in my office, scrolling through TikTok, occasionally looking up to ask stupid questions. Why are there so many codes? Can't we just color code the flights? Pink for on time, red for late? Because Courtney, I gritted out, slamming a reroute command into the console. The codes tell us why it's late. Mechanical, crew, weather, AC. A red color doesn't tell me if I need a mechanic or a priest. You're so negative, she sighed, blowing a bubble with her gum. You really need to work on your energy. It's affecting the team culture. The team culture? The team was terrified. Everyone was walking on eggshells. The break room, once a loud, raucous place where we traded war stories and gambled on arrival times, was now silent as a morgue. I went home that Friday and drank a bottle of cheap Pinot Grigio straight from the bottle while watching infomercials for pressure washers. I felt dirty. Not the honest dirt of a hard day's work, but the slimy, spiritual grime of watching something you built get dismantled by children playing with matches. I knew they were coming for me next. I could feel it in my bones like a storm front. They couldn't fire me yet. I held the keys to the kingdom. The legacy override. The custom scripts I wrote that bridged the gap between the ancient mainframe and the modern web interface. If I left, the bridge would burn. But they didn't know that. They thought it was all just data. So, I made a decision. If they wanted to drive the car, I'd let them. But first, I was going to remove the steering wheel. There's a specific kind of calm that comes over you when you decide to let the world burn. It's not peace exactly. It's more like the silence in the eye of a hurricane. You know the destruction is coming, you know the roof is about to get ripped off, but for this one moment, you just stand there and watch the barometer drop. I stopped arguing. That was the first sign, but they were too stupid to see it. Monday morning meeting, I just nodded. We're cutting the turnaround time in Dallas to 20 minutes, Blake announced, looking for a fight. Old Nicole would have screamed. 20 minutes isn't enough time to deplane, clean, fuel, and board unless you're throwing passengers out the emergency exits while taxiing. New Nicole just sipped her coffee. Great initiative, Blake. Very bold. Courtney beamed. See, I told you she'd get on board. It's all about mindset. Mindset. Yeah, my mindset was currently focused on creating a localized apocalypse. I went back to my desk and started the digital house cleaning. See, over the years, I'd written about 4,000 lines of custom script to keep AeroLink functional. These weren't official updates. IT didn't even know about half of them. They were patches, workarounds, band-aids made of code. Example, when the crew roster system crashes, which it does every Thursday, my script automatically pulls the backup data from payroll so we don't lose the pilot assignments. Without that script, the system just displays error 404, pilot not found, and the planes sit there until someone manually calls 300 pilots. I didn't delete the scripts. That would be illegal. That would be sabotage. I'm not a criminal. I'm a professional. Instead, I simply centralized them. I moved all my custom operational protocols into a single, encrypted user directory on the local server. My user directory, the one that was tied to my active employee credentials. The logic was sound. These are my personal productivity tools. If I am employed, they run. If I am not employed, well, access is revoked. Security protocol, right? Can't have former employees accessing the system. I spent 3 days doing this. I worked late. Courtney stopped by once, seeing me furiously typing. Wow, burning the midnight oil? Love the hustle, she chirped. Just documenting everything for the transition, I said, not lying. Making sure everything is in its right place. Perfect. We're bringing in the consultants from Deloitte next week to map the workflow. They're going to love what they find, I muttered. What was that? I said, I hope they're kind. By Thursday, the trap was set. My legacy override was now the structural load-bearing wall of the entire operation, and the detonator was my employment status. But I needed one more thing. A paper trail. A SIA, cover your ass, document so thick it could stop a bullet. I dug up an old compliance agreement from 2014. It was a dusty PDF regarding intellectual property of custom tools. It basically said that any code written by an employee specifically for personal workflow optimization remained the responsibility of that employee to maintain, unless formally transferred to IT with a 60-day review period. It was a loophole meant to stop programmers from claiming ownership of the company website, but the wording was vague. Personal workflow optimization. My scripts were personal. They optimized my workflow. I printed it out. I signed it. I buried it in a stack of hiring onboarding documents I sent to HR for the new interns.